Hi class, welcome to the first video lecture on Chapter 1. I'll be presenting my lectures in 15-minute or less segments, and so that will mean that there will probably be either 2 or 3 video lectures for you to view per chapter as we go through the semester. I want to encourage you to get the most out of these lectures by using the pause button whenever you don't catch something I say or you're not relating to something I say, going back and re-listening. That's one of the advantages actually to an online class, so I encourage you to do that. I'm going to start out looking at Chapter 1, and it's entitled An Invitation to Social Psychology. So we're going to be looking at some questions like, what is social psychology? And why not just rely on common sense and intuition? And we're going to be looking at related disciplines to social psychology, and hopefully we'll get to, I'm not sure if we'll get to it on this videotape or not, but hopefully we'll get to looking at a core concept in psychology, which is the power of the situation and the fundamental attribution error. So we'll start out taking a look at, why not rely on intuition and common sense? So for generations, people have passed on knowledge about how to act and how not to act. What kind of behaviors are going to be rewarding, and what are the types of behaviors I want to avoid. And we've passed this wisdom on through oral and written stories, fairy tales like Aesop's fables, parables, and folk wisdom. All of these different means of passing down wisdom represent theories. The stories, each story actually represents a theory about human behavior and social interaction. The theories, though, are based on intuition, common sense, and they come from the subjective experience of the storyteller themselves. So what's wrong with that? Well, on face value, nothing, but when you look at these stories and study them as a whole, you find that the morals to them oftentimes are conflicting. For instance, what about the old adage, birds of a feather flock together? Well, there's a contrary conclusion. There's also a theory that opposites attract. So those two ideas run totally counter to each other. What about better safe than sorry? Contrast that with the saying, nothing ventured, nothing gained, which encourages us to risk something to get something better. Here's a good one that we can all relate to. And you've all heard of, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So that's the idea that if we're away from someone, our love for them is just going to intensify, it's going to grow. Well, there's a counter adage to that, or a counter saying, out of sight, out of mind. Okay, so we've probably all experienced or witnessed a situation like that. So social psychologists reconcile these conflicting messages that we've gotten from common wisdom by testing the theories out. So testing intuition, testing our subjective observations out. So we go beyond that by applying the scientific method, in other words, research. Now, we put common sense to the test through research. We'll not talk about different research methods this week, but in Chapter 2 we'll be talking about different methods. So for now, let's look at what the definition of social psychology is. And this is your formal definition stated here at the bottom of the screen. The scientific study of the feelings, thoughts, and behaviors of individuals in social situations. So your authors Gilovich, Keltner, Chen, and Nisbet. That this is their definition of social psychology. I'd also like you to think of social psychology as being a way that we understand how we affect others and how others affect us. So it's the idea that our feelings, thoughts, and behaviors affect each other, and they make an impact. And so keep that in mind as we go through the rest of. Let's look at some disciplines that overlap and relate to social psychology. Personality psychology is one of the probably most overlapping disciplines to social psychology. Personality psychologists emphasize the individual differences between people. So they categorize people into different personality types. And although there's a lot of overlap in the things that we study and the behaviors we study, social psychologists put a lot more emphasis on what the situation the individual is in, not just the individual, but what forces outside the individual in the context of the situation are making an impact on behavior. Cognitive psychology emphasizes an individual's perceptions, thoughts, and memory. And social psychologists take all of this into consideration. However, the emphasis is on how our cognitions, our thoughts and beliefs are created and affected in the context of the situation that we're in, the social situation that we're in. And it's also the idea that our cognitions influence other individuals, and their cognitions influence our behavior. So for example, did you know that my expectations for you in this class might actually have an effect on how well you do in the class? There was a study where they looked at grade school, a grade school class. They told the teacher in the class that certain individuals, certain children in the class had been identified as having very high IQ, so that they should expect them to perform really well in their class. There was some deception used in this study, and the deception was that none of these kids had really been tested for IQ, and if they were, it would be much more likely that the couple of children picked would have had probably an average IQ, not a high IQ. So the dependent variable that they used in this experiment was at the end of the year, they wanted to see, how well these children performed, the ones that are identified with high IQ compared to the rest of the class. And the result was that they really did outperform everyone. So the conclusion of the researchers was that the expectation, the teacher's expectation, these are called expectancy effects, their expectation that the child was bright had an impact on the child's performance and probably influenced the way the teacher interacted with the child and maybe gave them more attention and more reinforcement for their good answers. So keep that in mind for how well you do in this class. I expect you all to do well. So sociology is another discipline that overlaps. Some of you may have had a sociology class, so we'll hear a lot of familiar concepts and terms that we share. The difference between social psychology and sociology is that sociologists study groups in the people in the aggregate. In other words, as a whole, groups as a whole, rather than single individuals and how they influence each other. Social psychologists emphasize individual differences in behavior. We're going to look now at a core concept in social psychology, the power of the situation. And the person that really led to this area of study was Kurt Lewin. Kurt Lewin is a social psychologist, and we consider him the founder of social psychology. He was actually a German physicist, wasn't a psychologist starting out, but a physicist, so he studied physical matter, so things like gravity and viscosity, the way physical objects work and react to each other and interact. He later became a psychologist, and he applied his theories of physics to psychological forces. And he thought that we can understand human behavior in the same way that we understand physical forces. He conceptualized that people are affected by a force field similar to the physical world. The force field in psychology is the social situation itself. That's the context of the force field, the social situation, and that they're affected just as much as objects are affected by things like gravity and viscosity. This is really significant because it flies in the face of common sense explanations of human behaviors that tend to attribute people's behavior to their character or their disposition. So internal kind of more hard drive attributes rather than the situation. In other words, humans tend to judge other people by their character rather than considering what the situation that the person is in and how that might affect their behavior. Which leads us to the fundamental attribution error. Now, the definition here is the failure to recognize the importance of situational influences on behavior and the corresponding tendency to overemphasize the importance of disposition on behavior. And that's usually when judging other people. There's an opposite side to this coin, though, of this definition, and that includes that even though when we judge others, we tend to blame their character or their disposition, when we judge ourselves, our own behaviors, we tend to come up with situational factors that affected our behavior and ignore characterological or dispositional explanations. I wrote up here, give you a definition of what a disposition is. So I like to think of it as anything internal factors that are more enduring, like your beliefs, your thoughts, your values, personality traits, your character, kind of whether you're a good person or a bad person, and your ability so that you can relate to this concept more. I think this is going to be the last slide on this tape, so I'll stop for now, and we will pick up on the next one on a study that kind of tested out this fundamental attribution error. Thank you.